and gentlemen, welcome to the 2021 Day 5 Connect Conference, brought to you by Huawei and IoT and engine stream partner, Software AG. Enjoy the next session.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this session of the Connect Conference 2021. Today, we've got a speaker with us that needs absolutely zero introduction. He's been a part of the sector for many, many years. Not that I'm implying that he's old, but he's been around for a long time, and I've certainly gotten to know him over the years. Phenomenal technical knowledge on just such a wide variety of topics, and somebody that can, certainly get into a debate and have a conversation about just about anything tech. He's currently responsible for new energy management systems at CBI Electric Low Voltage, who is a world leader in hydraulic magnetic circuit breakers, electrical distribution products, and accessories, a bit of a tongue twister. Roger Hislop is joining us today. Welcome, Roger. It's a really great to have you with us. He's an electrical engineer by training, for those of you who didn't know. And if those that do know him will know that he's got a wide-ranging expertise in enterprise business system, strategy and leadership, and he's passionate about innovation and driving entrepreneur programs. He was lead designer of both the technology and underlying business capabilities for IoT systems, ranging from distributed spectrum sensing to low power networks, and now electrical energy management and control. Roger Hislop is also the founder of the IoT Industry Council, another feather in his cap, an industry association that has just grown phenomenally and are raking in members. But that's also a sign of how the sector is moving forward and how the IoT industry is growing. Welcome, Roger. It's great to have you with us, and thank you very much for joining us.
And thank you, Juanita, for that kind introduction. I am wearing two hats. I am wearing my IoT Council hat. I've been involved in it for a couple of years now. The idea with the IoT Council is to kind of matchmake between the makers, designers, and developers of IoT solutions and the enterprises and government agencies that want to use it. It's been an exciting adventure, particularly from just meeting some amazingly capable, amazingly competent companies out there that are producing world-class IoT technology. So the other hat I wear is that of the Energy Management Systems Executive at CBI Electric. You probably know CBI. If you don't, I suggest you take a moment to go look in your distribution board. And almost certainly every single piece of switchgear inside there was manufactured by CBI. We did some numbers recently, and we guess that we've manufactured and are currently installed 1.2 billion of our plug points in various buildings around the country. So a proudly South African company, a proudly South African manufacturer. We manufacture everything locally in the country, and are basically global leaders in what we do. So a really great success story that many South Africans aren't really aware of, even though the company is almost 80 years old. So without any further blah blah, I'm going to jump straight into the presentation that I'm hoping will be really interesting for you, because many people never think about agri as in agriculture, as in the people that grow the food that we eat every day, that generates billions of rands in revenues for the country and keeps us fit and strong. So when we're talking about agri, I'm talking about agribusiness. So this is a transformation that's happened probably mostly in the last 20 years, where you don't really get the old school Jan Boer who's got a farm that his grandfather left him and he wears two-tone khaki and he's a man of the soil and knows everything about his crops and his beerster. That it's still a thing, but more you're starting to find that agri has become a business. It's become a manufacturing business. And like any other business, it's changing, it's adapting. And in particular, it's adapting to the world of technology and what technology can do for this new type of diversified but centrally managed agricultural manufacturing concern. So the agenda of today's talk is very quickly farming then and now. How's farming changed? I'm approaching this from a business point of view, so I'm not going to be talking about how you used to water your oat seeds. I'll be talking more about how you fund these systems that water your oat seeds. A little bit about the benefits of agri tech and how it benefits the agri industry. A little bit about the challenges of putting this technology into the field. And this is literally into the field, as in the field you're growing your crops in, as well as the field, as in there's a complexity to modern agriculture that many people don't appreciate, is that typically agriculture, it's the production of the crops or the production of the livestock. But also there's a bunch of business systems around that. There's the warehousing, the packing sheds, sort of the logistics business behind agri. There's the offices, the management of the agri concern. And then there's the residential aspect, which people often don't think about. There's a bunch of people that work on these farms. There's kind of the farm laborers and the workers. There's the farm managers, the people that actually manage the farming. There's technology people, there's mechanics, there's people who install and manage some quite complex industrial systems, water reticulation systems, power reticulation systems. So these people have got to stay in a place. So farming is also quite a big residential sector in its own way. I talk a little bit about the ins and outs of IoT in agriculture, what makes it interesting, and particularly what makes it interesting to the technology industry that's wanting to sell solutions. And then a little bit about new approaches, and then I close off with a case study of ZZ2, which is a massive agribusiness that you probably and almost certainly know of. Every time you go to your grocery store and you pick up ZZ2 tomatoes or avocados, it's a brand that you've probably been aware of for years and years and years and never really thought about. So they very kindly gave me some implementation information and some of their strategy information about how they would like to change how they consume energy, how do they reduce their green footprint, and how you are able to take some modern technologies and implement them in a way that is business-centric as well as kind of green-centric. So I'm going to show my slides now that I've done my quick who am I and why am I here. Okay, so that was the spiel to get us where we are now. So that was the agenda, what we're doing, why we're doing it. So let me look at the megatrends first. So stepping outside of the IoT space, stepping outside of the agri space, what are some things that we know are true? One, energy costs keep going up. They keep going up and up and up and up. Reliability keeps going down in South Africa. The second megatrend is that electrical energy as a percentage of all energy is going up and up and up and up, because consuming power through electricity is just incredibly convenient. You can centralize the generation of it, which means you can be incredibly efficient and hopefully reduce your emissions and some of the downsides of energy generation. The transmission and the carrying of it is eco-friendly. You don't have power lines pouring oil all over penguin colonies. So electrical energy is a growing industry in its own right, but it's also starting to take over from other energy industries. Electric cars is an obvious example. The third megatrend, climate change, is a thing. For the people a couple of years ago who were going, absolutely not, are starting to go, well, that's been a lot of storms this year already. So climate change is definitely a thing, and anything we can do to reduce the impact of human activity on our environment is almost definitely an axiom of goodness. Fourth megatrend, everybody wants automation and intelligence. As we get exposed to more and more automation in our private lives, we're starting to go, well, why can't I have that in the company I work in? Why can't I have that for my business? Why can't I know at the drop of a hat exactly what's happening anywhere in any of my operations? And finally, X as a service. It used to be that you'd buy everything. Increasingly, people want to be able to buy just the service they need, pay for it on some kind of subscription basis or some kind of OPEX basis. But most businesses don't want to be having to buy and manage and operate the stuff that they need just as a service. So when I said the price is rising, my God, is it rising? 2007, there was a bit of a split where Eskom's wheels started wobbling. And since then, it's been going in one direction. I think most of you are probably familiar with at least the concept of this graph, so I won't dwell on this anymore. What that is doing is leading to this. If you look on the lower right, that big red bubble is that 61% of all self-generated activity is solar. A little bit is wind. The one thing that solar and wind have in common is generally they're generated during the day when our environment is the most energetic. A bit of a horrifying number is the one on the left. That's comparing South Africa's kilowatt or price per kilowatt hour with that of Europe. And when you're significantly more expensive than the UK and Switzerland, you know that your electricity is getting expensive. So for sure, self-generation is rising. In South Africa in particular, solar is rising. And we're looking at, compound growth rates of well over 10% right now. And there is clear evidence that the price of solar generation is continuing to fall. We still haven't reached the stage where supply chain and manufacturing optimizations, technology optimizations are still kicking in. The price per gigawatt hour of solar is still declining and probably will continue for at least the next 5 to 10 years. So even if it doesn't decline, the expectation is that South Africa is going to see a massive boom in solar energy and solar investment. And the ability to manage the energy moving around in your business, moving between your loads and the sources of generation are going to become increasingly important. Finally, that everything as a service, if you could even imagine jet engines as a service. Both GE Aviation and Rolls-Royce many years ago realized that they can make more money leasing engines than they can selling them to aircraft operators. The key aspect here is that you need to have telemetry, highly detailed telemetry coming off these engines. They cost tens of millions of dollars. And you need to know exactly what's been happening with them by the operator, so that when you are understanding how you price your jet engine as a service, how your resale market will work, if you don't have this highly detailed telemetry coming from effectively IoT devices inside the engine, you're going to be at a bit of a loss. So megatrend, everything as a service. And when I say everything, that includes energy management as a service, and that's kind of my life for the last couple of years and my life going forward for the next few years. How do we make energy management as accessible to as many people as possible, as affordably as possible? Okay, now finally getting to the meat of what I'm talking about, farming and agribusiness. If you look at the changes in business over the last 100 years, manufacturing was the first to change, applying technology, but that took a good 40, 50 years for technology to really make an impact. Over the 50s, 60s, 70s, distribution and logistics started to rapidly change as technologies improved to make the scheduling of your goods, the tracking, the tracing. This all became easier and easier and faster and faster. And then as we moved into the sort of the late 80s, late 90s, the businesses that changed the fastest were information-led businesses. And this was basically the boom of the internet and people's understanding of how information and the ability to stay connected can fundamentally change our lives. And then most recently, what's been changing is the application of technology to the customer. They talk about mass customization, where you can have 10,000 products which are each unique to a particular customer's needs. The way the information is presented to them, the benefits they get out of it, the way they pay for it, this is all becoming highly customized, highly customer-centric. And these are changes that are starting to impact the farming industry. And if we look at farming, I look at it through the lens of somebody that actually has to manage a farm. So my family owns a farm in the Northwest. My parents used to breed Arabian horses and used to do a bit of light citrus farming. I say light citrus farming because the way markets are set up currently, you can only really operate a farm profitably if it's at fairly large scale. The logistics, the cost of energy makes it very difficult for a small scale farmer to be profitable. So you have this situation on the top left there. My wife standing next to some of the citrus fields as a storm blows in the background over the Hislop Mountains. That's farming that I and probably you grew up. Fields, trees, cattle. But it's changing rapidly. It's changing to very high yield, very densely operated farms where you've got big tunnels producing a crop that very possibly won't even be available on shelves in South Africa. It gets picked into trucks, straight to the coast, onto a ship, it's gone. It generates a massive amount of wealth, but it's very, very, very capital intensive. And there's a very fundamental change in the nature of farming in this capitally intensive way of doing things. So just to give you an idea, this is April 2017. This is the satellite picture near where our farm is. Our farm is just up off the top, above that big green block of vegetation. 2017. 2019, that big area that had been cleared and tunnels have been built. And these tunnels, there's berries or some other similar fragile crop underneath it. April 2019. May 2020, that whole big field on the right-hand side cleared and they've started building tunnels. March 2021, the tunnels are built there. There's some more tunnels going in on the top left. And October 2021, so what's that? March to October, wow, that's 6 months. The area that I've kind of highlighted, that's now been cleared and is now having more tunnels added. And this is happening all the way up this particular valley in the Magaliesberg. And each of these large blocks, I would guess it's 100 million rand capital expenditure to build that thing. So farming, it's very quick moving. Basically, an investor will go, there's a business case to build a farm to sell this crop. We need to invest this amount of money. And within 2 or 3 years, an area that used to be covered in whatever crop has been bulldozed, infrastructure put in, and high intensity, high yield farming techniques have been applied to a couple of square kilometers at a time. It gets a bit confusing to work out where the changes are happening in terms of the ownership of farms. So I've been looking around quite hard and it's very difficult to find accurate information about this. If you look at these numbers, these are VAT registered farms in South Africa. And there doesn't seem to be a very, very big change. Apart from large farms above 10 million rand have increased fairly significantly from about 3,500 to just over 5,000. There seemed to be a boom in 2015 that yielded a bit of a bust. I don't have more later figures, but anecdotal evidence seems to suggest that this trend towards fewer micro farms, fewer small farms, and an increasing number of very large farms is continuing. More recent numbers, these are from 2017. they paint a very interesting picture that the large farms are 6.5% of the total number of farms, but they generate 2/3 of the total revenue in South Africa from the agri sector. They employ more than half of all the agri-related farmers or farm-related roles. So even though the numbers don't seem to show a clear trend of consolidation, the revenue opportunity is very clear, and the sheer size of the agri business in the South African economic context is clear. I did find these numbers, which definitely show that there's a consolidation in farming, is that we're generating as much or significantly more milk product, but the number of physical farms has fallen radically. I mean, you're talking about a fourfold decrease in the number of physical farms that are separately registered. So that's the general picture. Consolidation, and the bigger the farm or the bigger the farm concern can be, the more viable it can be as an economic vehicle. So generally what you'll find is there's a certain amount of professionalization going on. Many more farmers today have got tertiary qualifications in farming, in agri, in viticulture, in horticulture, in whatever culture. It's becoming a much more academically based field where you're not looking at trying to learn as you go or learning from your forefathers. You're actually learning global best practices and applying them. What you are finding is there's a consolidation, that smaller farms are being bought by investment farming organizations, I guess you could call it. And they're definitely going to be restructuring them much more as businesses. This has led to an corporatization of the farms, because if a farm is structured as an investment opportunity, it's going to be much more interesting to institutional investors, but that means the underlying systems in the farms have to be much more business-centric. And by underlying systems, I'm basically talking about IT systems. And this also talks to the fact that if you've got strong business systems that underpin your farming organization, this now allows for a much more decentralized approach where you have individual farming operations controlled through a central body, organization, cooperative, whatever it might be. But this allows the securing of investment funding to take this sort of virtuous circle and move it forward. So there's quite a strong strategy underpinning this, and a lot of it is around there's massively undervalued agricultural assets out there, farms which are not generating the amount of income that they could or should be, that can be acquired and turned into economic success stories. And part of this is around the acquisition, is around the access to capital markets, but also around the strengthening of the intelligence that the farming industry has. Where are these farms? What are the best crops? There's a lot of information that needs to be gathered and managed. The ability for the farms to be managed as businesses becomes key, and that's partly around the building of market ecosystems, that you've got supply chains, you've got offtake customers, all those good things, as well as a technology to allow you to do this management. And then if the kind of the third pillar of this move to turn underperforming agri assets into shareholder value is around the data quality that you can show to an investor. Are you gathering good ground truth data? Are you able to model the financial performance and the operational performance of this farm? Are you able to mitigate risk and manage your risk? So this has led to a massive uptick in call it the farm tech space, for want of a better word. And I think there's a massive opportunity there for players in the digital industry. Some of the benefits, I mean, a lot of these are kind of obvious when you see it. In the field and harvest management, are your dams full? Do you have to send somebody to walk 3 kilometers to go and check and come back and turn on the pump? Can you do it remotely? Do you understand exactly what your soil moisture is at every point in your field? Are you overwatering here and underwatering there? So in terms of IoT technology, there's a pile of technology out there. Temperature, humidity, soil moisture trackers, asset trackers. Are your farming vehicles where you think they are? Is your plant where you think it is? That's a core area that IoT was born to address. I talked a little bit about the fact that a farm is often more than just fields. Often they'll have significant, almost industrial type of operations, packing and logistics. There's a massive requirement around air conditioning, cooling, as well as conveyor belts, and there's pumps and there's pallets, and there's a lot of equipment to be monitored. And this again is perfectly suited to IoT. And then finally, farm operations management. You've got workers, you've got managers, you've got engineers, you've got horticulturalists, you've got a bunch of people. These people need to live and work somewhere. And this talks to a lot of the building management systems, the environmental management systems that IoT is perfectly suited to address. So in a way, big agri is three almost distinct sectors all rolled into one. There's the field and harvest management, there's the packing and logistics and the sort of industrial management, and then there's actual farm operations. And all of this makes the agri industry a really interesting industry from a technology application point of view. And that's before we even look at some of the challenges that are unique to the sector. And those are, I thought I could do something very elaborate, but I think all of this is pretty obvious. It just needs 5 bullet points. Connectivity within the farm. How do you connect a sensor on a pump to some kind of central management system? How do you make sure that somebody way out in the field can interact with that management system? Last and middle mile distances are key. You'd almost say that the last mile for a farm is within the farm, and that's local connectivity within the farm environment. Middle mile, because you're probably having to connect to some kind of reasonably major POP directly. Middle mile is a huge problem, especially in the remote areas where your choices are very, very, very limited, and the cost of implementing any kind of middle mile technology might be quite high. But that's where it gets really interesting for people in the telecom sector to put their creative thinking caps on. TV white space, great use case. Private LTE, maybe. Satellite, well, it's getting cheaper, definitely. So the fundamental problem in farm and agri environments is the inter and intrasite distances. The intrasite distance is probably the easiest to solve from a commercially available technology point of view. Cloud availability, obviously, everything's moving to the cloud, X as a service. Having access to your cloud resources is becoming more important. So now we have to start developing technology that's cloud friendly, but understands distance problems and the physical issues of rolling out technology in these kind of environments. So you need to have maybe edge cloud nodes that synchronize with the cloud from time to time. You can't do everything in the cloud because obviously you're on a farm in Kuruman. It doesn't make sense. And finally, an issue in the agri environment is the resilience of the equipment. And I'm talking about the resilience of the information, but also the physical resilience of stuff. You've got people working with kit that are used to working with big steel things, tractors, rotavators. These are things that you can smack with a hammer and they're not going to blink. They can be in very dusty environments, very humid environments. They might get rained on. The people working on them may or may not be skilled or trained to work with them. So they've got to be pretty tough. So that means that technology in the agri space has to be pretty tough. So then let's take a step back and look at IoT. What is it? What are some of the issues that IoT has that are relatively unique to the technology, and then reapply to farming? So the problem with IoT is fundamentally you connecting the dumb with the smart, the slow with the fast, the inflexible with the flexible, the silicon hardware with the cloud software. Because most IoT devices are low power, most IoT devices have got very limited processing power on them, because Sometimes you want to process at the edge, sometimes you don't want to process at the edge. Sometimes you want something that's small, simple, extremely reliable, easy to power, easy to work with, which generally means it'll be a simple device. There's a bit of a difference between the operational IT people's needs and the IT people's needs. You need to have something that's quick, cheap, easy to deploy, easy to manage. You have to be able to manage it end to end. You need to be able to know that your telemetry is coming from the field where it needs to get to. The IT people are probably worried more about things like flexible service provisioning. How do you manage your SLAs with the vendors? How do you manage compliance? Is there a technology abstraction which will allow you to future-proof your solution as you adapt your back-end infrastructure? So there's some subtle, some obvious differences between operational type technology and information technology type technology. If we have a quick look at the device landscape, devices can range from extremely simple, which have only probably one sensor, one use case. A water meter would be a good example of this. All it has to do is to measure how much water has gone through the meter, at what time of day, stick it into some kind of message and transmit it, all the way through to very complex sensors. Typically, there's a trade-off. As your sensor becomes more complex, it consumes more power. If it consumes more power, you probably can't power it from a battery or a tiny solar panel. You've got to start putting in wiring and power supplies. As your device becomes more complex, it probably requires more data transmission capability. In certain environments, you've got very fast, hundreds of megabits per second on Wi-Fi. In some environments, you can send 2 or 3 12-byte messages per day. There's always trade-offs, and in IoT, these trade-offs are very sharply focused. Call it the cyber systems, your back end. How much complexity do you have in your kind of back end, middle end, and front end? Where do you do your advanced analytics and your predictive maintenance and your artificial intelligence and the very clever stuff? So again, there's these trade-offs between where does the complexity sit, where does the cost sit, where does the management sit. In sensor networks, this gets really interesting because the IoT device itself has to be installed where the thing is happening. The pump actuator has to be next to the pump. The dam level sensor has to be next to the dam. The room occupancy sensor has to be in the room. It's blindingly obvious, but also it's a very, very key design criterion when you're looking at IoTs. How do I connect my device? What kind of technology do I need to use? What is the cost of that technology? What is the forward proofness of this technology? So in the agri space, these are typically the issues you need to deal with. You generally start with range. What is the range trade-off I'm going to have to make? Because eventually this will always play out into what's the operating cost of this IoT infrastructure. A quick view of some of the technologies through this lens of power versus range versus your data speed that you can attain. So this is a 3-dimensional graph. As you go kind of up away from the floor, that's how fast your technology is. As you go deep into the page, that's how much power this thing will use. And then as you go to the right, that's the data range. So I've pulled out a couple of IoT technologies. LoRa is a technology that many people are familiar with in the IoT space. It's more strictly speaking, it's LoRaWAN, long range wide area network. It's based on an open standard from the IEEE 802.15.4, which also underpins Zigbee and Bluetooth and MyOT and 6LoWPAN and a number of other technologies. But LoRa itself is very widely deployed, but is actually a proprietary technology of a company called Semtech, who's done some kind of licensing deals to reduce the cost to the end user. LoRaWAN, reasonably fast, very low power consumption, fairly long range. You're talking sort of 5 to 10 kilometers, depending on your line of sight. The opposite extreme of that, you could say, is Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi, very short range. You're going to struggle to do more than 100 or 200 meters, but it's very, very, very fast. Quite power hungry. It's unlikely you can battery power an IoT device with Wi-Fi in a useful way. As you head out to the back, GPRS is out there. GPRS 2G technology. Great technology. It's got a couple of problems. Quite power hungry. You've got to have a SIM inside your device, and it uses the mobile phone network in a fairly clumsy way. So there's a bunch of companies out there who specialize in making sure that your mobile network data stuff works correctly in an IoT context. And there's a number of companies. I mean, just amongst the IoT Council members, there's FlickSwitch. There's some really good players in the space. FlickSwitch, a proudly South African company. The GPRS space is, of course, going to be facing an end of life. The operators are slowly turning them off. LTE has got an IoT capability, either natively in a GPRS type way, or there's a new technology called NB-IoT, which is specifically designed for IoT. Vodacom has launched it in South Africa. It is sort of commercially available, but not very widely. We're all kind of waiting to see whether it really takes off. And then Sigfox on the bottom. Sigfox is a proprietary technology from a company in France, which was very widely deployed in South Africa. More recently, you've probably heard that the South African operator of Sigfox, a company called Squidnet, was effectively liquidated by its shareholders. But I'm expecting any day now a announcement to be made of some of the key users and investors in South Africa bringing Sigfox back into the mix. To give you a sense, Sigfox, I mean, they had almost the entire country covered with at least one base station, in many cases 2 base stations. So that would be the blue bit. Sigfox is very, very low data rate, extremely long range. So very suited to a set of applications, particularly agri. GSM, by comparison, so this is GPRS. I mean, this should in principle cover everywhere, but you can see there's big areas of no coverage in theory. In practical terms, often areas that show to be covered actually don't have coverage. So these are some of the issues around the connectivity in the IoT space, the trade-off of power versus data rate versus distance, and then the fact that there's a number of different technologies, all of which have their strengths and weaknesses. So if it's a given, we have your IoT devices, you've selected the best ones for your use case. They talk using a connectivity medium that suits your long-term view. The connectivity medium is available in your area, or you can install it at a reasonable cost. So now you've got your IoT. You've settled on some business systems, and now it's a matter of how do you turn your agribusiness into a fully IoT-enabled, cloud-friendly, modern business. So in the old days, you'd probably have something like this. You've got so now this is talking about quite a tech-forward farm. Most farms probably wouldn't have this level of sophistication, mostly because it's really, really expensive. So you have your field production control systems, PLC-based, a lot of stuff out in the field. Your packing and warehousing systems, you've got a certain amount of data there coming in from IoT or some kind of sensing in the plant. And then you'll probably have people entering information into tablets or writing them on forms and having it captured. And then your building management and your office systems. These would all feed into some kind of centralized information management system, which a bunch of users would have access to in some way. The future is going to be much more distributed. A lot of your devices are going to be wireless. You've probably still got a bunch of wired things, but now you're going to be connecting them wirelessly to some kind of concentrator. Your devices out in the field will be wireless, connected over either a national network like LTE or Sigfox when it comes back on stream, or possibly satellite, or you've built a small LoRaWAN network that covers just your farm. Similarly, packing and warehouse, you'll have some stuff that's connected and then aggregated via some kind of wireless network, some kind of wireless backhaul. Similarly, you'll have a whole lot of IoT devices connected directly to your aggregation point. Similarly, your building management systems. Then there'll be a centralized farm IT where some of the stuff will be done via the cloud, because even in remote areas, cloud is going to become a thing. And this will then talk to your transformation layers, your data lake, and then into your business systems. This is most likely where IoT in the farming sector is going to go, because it makes so much sense. So what is the opportunity to you as the telecoms provider, the telecoms operator, the digital transformation consultancy, the company in the technology space that's starting to go, maybe agri is an interesting market. So I did a couple of back of the envelope calculations. So there were, call it 8 to 10,000 medium and large farms in South Africa. You're probably looking at about a 200,000 Rand, sort of call it CapEx and installation opportunity, plus another, I don't know, 20, 30,000 Rand a year in subscription and kind of related services. This is probably seriously lowballing. So there's almost certainly a very interesting business opportunity in agri-tech and farm tech that is massively underserviced. There's a great deal of scope for companies to look at what technology they can bring to bear for farming businesses, because the opportunity is latent but rapidly growing. Okay, so now we understand IoT, we understand a little bit about the agri space. So let's maybe zoom in a little bit on a particular use case for IoT. And this is a use case close to my heart, because obviously it's my day job these days. And that's energy management, specifically IoT applied to energy management. Now, there's, call it 4 pillars that IoT-based energy management systems rest on. The first thing is we can save companies money. We can save them lots of money. We can probably save them at least 10 to 15% on their energy bills, possibly without even reducing a single kilowatt hour that they use, simply by managing when the energy is used. But energy management systems can definitely save money. They allow you to manage your energy, and this is partly from a cost point of view, it's partly from a reliability and planning point of view. If you know that a particular breaker has got 200 amps capacity and it's got 180 amps running through it right now, you're probably not going to stick another conveyor belt on it. If your energy reticulation systems aren't managed, the chance of you accidentally blowing something up and not being able to trade are quite high. So managing energy is partly around what am I spending my money on? It's partly around where should I be spending more money? How do I reduce the money I spend? But also, energy is power, literally and figuratively. Am I using the power? Am I using it optimally? Can I change how I use it? What is the risk to me of using it in a particular way? Management is very important. Automation, obviously. Who doesn't want to make computers do things that they would have to do otherwise? Be certified. Already in South Africa, every commercial building is going to have to produce call it a green certificate, an energy efficiency compliance certificate. A bit like on the side of your fridge, it's from kind of red to green. You're either great and you're super energy efficient, or you're red and you're really not energy efficient. You're going to have that certificate. Eventually, there's going to be consequences to being not energy efficient. It could be that you can't take advantage of incentives. There's SARS Section 12I and 12L incentives around innovation, energy management. Certain municipalities reduce your rates and taxes by a certain amount if you're energy efficient. In certain cases, your power utility may reward you for energy efficiency, because South Africa is a very strange country. And in some cases, there may be regulatory requirements. They can be specific to South Africa, that you've got to have it, or it could be you wanting to export, say, your crops to the European Union, which requires energy efficiency. So the certification issue is huge. Very quickly, just to understand a little bit how to save money, most consumers of energy in the commercial space do so on a time of use tariff. You pay more for the energy you use between, I don't know, 8 and 11 in the morning and 2 and 4 in the afternoon, depending on the tariff you're on. If you can turn off your geyser or your hydro boils or your air conditioners in those times, the people involved in the room wanting coffee probably won't even notice, because things take a while to cool down. But you use the energy at the time that makes the most financial sense to use that energy. You can move loads into more optimum times to increase the efficiency of your PV systems. You can clip off unwanted, unexpected, and unplannable simultaneous activation of certain loads. If you've got 10 machines all turning on at the same time, it's going to generate a massive spike. If you can stagger those loads, you can reduce your maximum demand penalties. So there's a number of ways you can save power through managing your electrical energy. In the case of PV, a lot of people are putting in PV. Normally, you have to overspec your PV system because you have to spec it to the minimum. Sorry, your PV has to be able to address the maximum possible load that it may see. So you're going to have to install a system that's going to be 50 kVA because it'll see 50 kVA, and then you add another 10 or 20 kVA just for in case. And that can easily add 30 or 40% to the cost of a PV system, which can massively impact the ROI that you'd hope to get from it. And at some point, there's going to be trading and wheeling, so you're going to need to know what's going in and out. Automation, there's, as I mentioned earlier, this is a no-brainer. If you can sleep late because a computer is watching a dial for you, then that's all good. People are very poor at doing things consistently and repeatedly. If you can have a computer make sure that the lights all get turned off at the right time according to certain conditions, the computer will always get it right. The person tasked with doing it, maybe they get bored. So automation is a huge aspect in any kind of IoT implementation. What can you automate? And then finally, this idea around democratizing energy management. You no longer need expensive consultants with clipboards. You can now use a computer to spit out the certificate you need for somebody to verify, stamp, and put up on your wall. On the slide there, that's literally the certificate you get when you get a certificate for your building. And by the end of next year, you're going to have one of these in your building some way. So think about it. A little bit of, I don't know what you'd call it, patting on the back. So CBI introduced its Astute Smart range. We call it the only proper kit you can buy in the country because it's SAN certified, it's Acasa certified. It's got flipping big relays, not tiny little relays. It's not going to explode on you. It's not going to fail. But this is fundamentally aimed at the consumer market. It's app-based. You can set up your devices. They look and feel exactly the same as a traditional dumb device would be. Take out the dumb one, stick in the smart one, set it up in the app, off you go. You've got complete visibility and control over the load that device is connected to, but it doesn't talk to the commercial or professional market. And that's where we're going with energy management, is that it must be suitable to large-scale deployments to a commercial audience. And anybody, I think, in the audience today understands this data is the new oil concept. If you don't have a technology system that generates large amounts of structured data that can be extracted via API to do advanced analytics and and kind of magic sauce on, you don't have a commercial grade system. It's also very important that you've got central deployment, central management. Setting up and configuring a single device is easy. Setting up and configuring 2 devices is easy. Setting up and configuring 200 devices is stupidly time consuming, and you don't want to do it. So any kind of commercial grade system has to be centrally managed, centrally deployed. And then there has to be a consistent and resilient experience, which means that you need to have all of the systems in the back end. Anybody in the audience that's from a telecom space fundamentally understands the nature of service delivery. You've got to be able to pick up that a problem has happened before the customer phones you to complain. So you have to build a whole lot of infrastructure on the back end to manage that experience. So when we get back to the agri space, what does IoT do for the agri business? What does it do for the farmer? It allows you to reduce waste. That's key. It allows you to drive economies, because now you need to have technically capable people that can come implement these agri tech solutions in the sector. You're going to have to skill up people. You're going to have to train them. You're going to have to take people into a new space. You need to improve people's lives. IoT can absolutely improve people's lives. Instead of a farm worker walking 3 kilometers to go check if a dam's full, they could be doing something useful like making sure the crops are correctly watered, that their pump is working correctly, maybe that the pipes aren't leaking. You wanting to let computers do the job that is uninteresting, unfulfilling, and not economy creating. And then finally, IoT for the agri space, reality checked. You're not looking at financial numbers, which are a very poor proxy for real life. You're looking at how many liters did I use? How many kilograms did I spread on the crops? How many pounds of lettuce did I pack today? You want to know exactly what real life is telling you, and that's what IoT lets you do. Right, so we're reaching the last bit of my presentation, and that's that little bit of a case study. And this is just to throw into sharp relief, to put into real life what it is that IoT does for the agribusiness, how much benefit it will unlock, and what the opportunity can be for providers of technology to seriously look at the space, to develop and implement and deploy solutions for the agri industry. So I mentioned ZZ2, which very kindly gave me permission to use them in this case study. They produce a lot of tomatoes, like really a lot of tomatoes, 190,000 tons of tomatoes, 12,000 tons of avocados. And not only do they produce 12,000 tons of avocados, they produce 300,000 avocado trees every year from their nursery to sell to other farmers of avocados. Berries, it's a smaller part of their business that is growing. Deciduous fruit, massive part of the business, especially in the Western Cape, 12,000 tons per annum. And then they've still got some livestock and game, because the people at ZZ2 are fundamentally farmers. They love farming. If it can't be tomatoes, then maybe it can be something else. But ZZ2 comes out of an amalgamation of a number of farming operations, and they've very, very successfully combined it into a very effective business that's got a very clear strategic view. So I'm going to put up this slide. I'm not sure if you can read it, but it gives you a bit of a sense of the fact that ZZ2, it thinks and operates like any large successful company. It's got long-term plans, it's got strategies, it puts them in place, it measures them. And there's a number of reasons. One is obviously shareholder value, one is successful operations, but one is also a kind of a green imperative that ZZ2 sees to reduce their impact on the environment, to increase the sustainability of what they do. So if we look at some of the things they've been doing, some of them are physical implementations. You look around the farm and you go, where can I save energy? Where can I be more efficient? Variable speed drives for irrigation pumps. That can be a huge saver of energy. A lot of the old pumps are extremely electricity hungry because they were designed at a time when electricity was dirt cheap. One of the pumps at our farm was struck by lightning. It's an old 3-phase pump. It used to draw an enormous amount of power. We replaced it with a modern single-phase pump. It probably uses 300 to 500 watts, but the old one used to use 3 to 4 kilowatts. The modern technology is generally significantly more efficient than older technology. Fluorescent lights, replace them with LED, an immediate gain. High efficiency water heaters, kind of ultra donkeys that are they're a long-term investment because you're looking at a higher upfront cost, but over time, lower cost of ownership, lower running costs. Then in terms of specifically energy management interventions, something as simple as installing geyser timers. If you've got 500 odd geysers, putting on timers can reduce enormous amount of electricity usage. Geyser timers are all very well, but obviously they're not smart, so they can't be adaptive. So you want a geyser timer that's actually a smart controller that's hooked up to a back-end smart management system so that you can adapt your utilization for the time of year. It could be that somebody's been out late and they're on the way home. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, they want a warm shower. Your old geyser timer, you can't manually turn it on and off from 100 kilometers away. So geyser timers are huge, but they're the first step towards a properly managed smart energy management system. Tariff switching, just paying what you need to pay because you're using the right tariff. And then putting in an energy management system, you can't manage what you can't measure, to be able to actually understand exactly where you're using your power. But ZZ2's ultimate objective is to reduce their energy consumption by at least 10% in the next 3 years. And you can see on the right there's a number of logos. That's because the company is working with kind of leaders in the field in terms of the CSIR and the National Cleaner Production Company Corporation, I forget what it is, NCPC, but also to adopt ISO, the important ISO standards, and to work in tandem with government so that policy from a government point of view and what the industry needs can be aligned. Just to understand what they're spending all this power on, and it's a lot of power, 45 million kilowatt hours per year. They've got residential houses, 300 plus, pack houses and logistics facilities. They've got a lot of boreholes. Not only do you have to pump the water out of the borehole, you've got to pump it into a dam, and often you've got to move it between dams. So 160 pumping stations and a lot of geysers because people use a lot of hot water. So we're talking about 80 million rand a year. Now, if you put that in the context of the telecoms industry, one company spending that kind of money on energy is definitely a company you're interested in talking to for telecoms, because this is a company that understands the application of investment on the ultimate business case. If there's a strong investment case for putting in better tech, these kind of companies like ZZ2 will put in better tech. So this is the end of my presentation. Just to understand a little bit of what I've been saying, it basically comes down to the farming industry is becoming a business. It's becoming a very large, very professional business. It's a business that's been very badly underserviced by the technology industry, probably because it used to be quite difficult to go and talk to individual farmers, very long kind of sales cycles, a little bit risk averse, maybe a little bit tech ignorant, tech averse. That's changed. That's fundamentally changed. It's now become a massive opportunity. So I would really encourage you to understand the IoT industry, because IoT is going to be the coalface of technology in the agri sector. But then to take a step back and go, what is their connectivity requirement? What is their cloud and data processing requirement? And ultimately, what is the customized digital transformation environment that will become more and more interesting as time goes by? Right, so to wrap up, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for attending the Connects conference digitally. Hopefully sooner rather than later we'll be able to meet again in person. And if there's any take home I can leave you with, is I took that hand waving back of the napkin estimate of what the connectivity and information services business might look like, and multiplied it out by the number of farms. We're talking about something in the region of 2 billion rand. And I think that's enough of a market to make it interesting for enough of you to go after. I would encourage you to get hold of me if you want to find out more, either about the IoT sector, about the energy management sector, or about the IoT Industry Council. My email address is roger@iotcouncil.org.za, roger@iotcouncil.org.za. So thank you again for your attention, and I wish you a very enjoyable rest of the Connects conference.
Thanks, Roger. That was a really interesting session. Thank you so much for your time and joining us today. And from the Digital Council Africa, we wish the IoT Industry Council all the best. May you go from strength to strength. And we look forward to continue our relationship with the IoT Industry Council and growing it so that we can create jobs and grow our respective sectors together. Have a good afternoon, everyone, and remember to join us for the next session.
Ladies and gentlemen, we trust you enjoyed the session. Thank you to all our sponsors and partners for helping us bring this event to you. Please click on the next link to join the following session.